everyone could take their seats, please, and could I bother someone to just close that door, please? Thank you.
Hard to sit there.
It is very
Thank you. Thanks, Dan. I will call to order the meeting of the CUSD 201 Board of Education today, Tuesday, May 14th, 2013. If we can have a roll call, please, Mrs. McMahon.
Mr. Armstrong?
Here.
Ms. Caparelli?
Here.
Mrs. Charlton?
Here.
Mrs. Hancock?
Here.
Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mrs. Notbush?
Here.
Mr. Price?
Here.
If we can all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the first thing under public comment will be myself. The other night, last week, Joel Price and I, as members of the board, were able to attend the district-wide recognition of staff for service and staff for retirement. And we will be doing that at the next board meeting, honoring our retired staff. However, at this point, we as a board would like to take a moment to recognize Judy McMahon. Judy has been with the district for 25 years. And she has been a resource of immense help and intelligence, I can say from myself, and on behalf of the board. And there's so many things that Judy does that no one knows. So I will, if I may, resolution of recognition and appreciation, Judy McMahon. Whereas this Community Unit School District 201 has been fortunate to have a dedicated secretary to the board committed to the mission of the district. And whereas Judy McMahon has provided 25 years of dedicated service to Community Unit School District 201. And whereas we, as members of the Community Unit School District 201 Board of Education, wish to extend our utmost appreciation for the dedicated service Judy has provided the CUSD 201 school community in the support of their efforts to provide a quality education. And whereas the board wishes to extend our sincere gratitude for all of Judy's efforts in providing the necessary information and support to the Board of Ed in order for the board to do their work in achieving the vision of the district. Now therefore be it resolved that the Community Unit School District 201 Board of Education recognizes and appreciates the many years of service of Judy McMahon, that this resolution of appreciation and support be duly recorded in the minutes of the CUSD 201 Board of Ed on this 14th day of the month of May in the year 2013. The chair will entertain a motion to accept this resolution.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. So, Judy, we would like to first present you with this resolution, and we have one more thing for you. Okay.
They told me they were here for the tip.
Yeah, I'm sure they were. You know, once in a while, this is a great place to be, and you know what? Okay, now we will move on. We will, first of all, are there any public comments before we move to the discussion on the TIF? All right, then I will introduce Mr. Dean Crone, our school attorney, and you have, are you going to do handouts and whatever you're doing?
I have some handouts. So I'll give these to the board members, and also the members of the audience.
Thanks, Dean. Sure.
Everybody get a copy?
So
Yeah.
let me just first say, if you would like to do your presentation, and then we can entertain questions from the board. And then if any members of the community would like to ask a question, and you can either stay there or feel free to come over here and people can come. We'll just kind of play it by ear.
Okay.
Okay.
And do you want me to address the board, or do you want me to turn around and address the audience? Because I've done this once for the board, although not all of the same board members as tonight.
Well, it's probably best to stay there, just because we are taping as well.
Okay.
And there's a camera
All right,
there, so.
all right, very good.
And Dean, right to your left is the document camera, so anything that you put there they'll be able to show on the screens.
So if I lay it here, face
Yeah.
up?
See you there.
Sure enough, look at that.
Sure enough, there you go.
Excellent.
Okay.
I'm so tempted to wave, but I won't. I'll restrain that impulse. Well, I'm going to spend a little bit of time tonight talking about tax increment financing. As you know, some of you, dear to my heart. And before I get into tax increment financing itself, let me just start with a review of certain sort of basics about property taxes, so that the meaning of some of the terms will be clearer, perhaps, for some of the people here tonight. Each local taxing district, the school district, the park district, the county, the township, the village, and so on, they all levy property taxes on an annual basis. And you'll be doing that pretty soon. And that's a dollar amount. You approve a levy for a dollar amount. And then that levy, that dollar amount, is sent to the county. And the county computes a rate for your district. And the way it does that is it takes every taxable piece of property within your district and it finds what is called the EAV, equalized assessed value, for that property, and it adds them all up, and it computes the total EAV within your district, and then it takes your tax levy, which is a dollar amount, and it divides it by the total EAV, which is another dollar amount, and it computes a rate, a decimal. 3 point something, 4 point something, I don't know what yours is, but in any event, it's a rate. And then it takes that rate and it goes back and it applies that rate to the EAV of each property, each parcel within your district. And the product, you multiply those together, and the product tells the county and subsequently the property owner how much money he or she owes in taxes to the school district for that year, right? So the amount of taxes that the district receives depends upon the total EAV that is available to generate taxes for your district. And that's important because it's sort of the foundation for the concept of tax increment financing. And then every other taxing district does the same thing. They levy a dollar amount, send it to the county computes a rate, applies that to the EAV of each parcel, and comes up with the taxes for all the property owners within the village or the county or the township. And they add all those up on your tax bills, and you pay that to the county, and it gets distributed to all the taxing districts. Okay, so now, tax increment financing, how does it work? Well, tax increment financing is a tool for economic development that has been given to Illinois municipalities by the Illinois legislature in a statute that we refer to as the TIF Act. The tool is meant to be used in areas within a city or village that are blighted or on their way to becoming blighted and will become blighted if nothing is done to stop that process of decay from occurring. Okay? And the theory is that in a truly blighted area, and let's all think about the worst area we can imagine in a big city, because maybe it's easier to imagine it in a big city than a small town, I don't know. But let's think of a slum, a terrible place where the buildings are falling apart and they're all vacant and nothing good is happening. And the assumption is that under those circumstances, under those conditions, no private investor, no private developer will be willing to invest in that property to redevelop it, to tear down those old blighted buildings and build a shiny new shopping center, for example, or new condominium buildings or a new factory, because the risk would be too high. The chances of losing the investment would be too great. Okay? So in a truly blighted area, no developer is going to invest any money to build new buildings and redevelop that area without some special incentive. And that's where this tax increment financing comes in. Because what happens is the city or village can designate this specific geographical area. Sometimes it's a block. Sometimes it's smaller than a block. Has to be at least an acre, I think. I forget. Anyhow, has to be of a certain minimum size. And can be larger, can be several blocks. Here in Westmont, the proposal has been to create a tax increment financing district, TIF district, for the entire central business district, extending to the east and west of Cass and going all the way north to Chicago Avenue and so on. It's a large area, including over 400 different parcels. The city or the village designates this specific geographical area. Let's think about that block that's truly blighted that I was just talking about. Let's think of it as a single block, just because it's easier to get your head around. And the city designates that block as a tax increment financing district. And on the day that it does that, on the day that it passes those ordinances, the EAV for those parcels within that area are frozen for purposes of generating taxes for the local taxing districts. So let's assume that that block, that blighted area, has a total EAV on the day that the TIF district is created of $1 million. Just an easy number to remember. Okay? That $1 million becomes what is called the base EAV. The TIF district is generally created for 23 years. The rationale for the 23 years is because usually or very often using the TIF process requires borrowing money by issuing bonds. Bonds are typically for 20 years. It might take a couple of years to get things going and put the pieces in place, so you get to 23. Okay? So for those 23 years, the amount of EAV within that area that will be used for generating taxes for the local taxing districts is $1 million. Okay? But now, because the city has the ability to use TIF financing, it's able to attract a developer. Because it can say to the developer, we, the city, will use TIF revenue, and we'll talk about what all that is. We will use TIF revenue over the next 23 years to pay for some of the costs of the redevelopment. If you come in here and you buy this land up and you knock all these buildings down, these old, decrepit buildings, and you build that shiny new shopping center, which is going to cost a lot of money, we, the city, we will pay a significant portion of the costs of doing so, which will reduce the cost to you, which will increase your potential profit, and you will have a much greater chance of success with this project. Okay? And so the city and the developer enter into a development agreement for this area, this block. where the developer agrees to come in and do those things, buy the land, knock the buildings down, build the new shopping center, and the city agrees to pay for certain costs, maybe land acquisition, maybe infrastructure, new roads, new sewers, new water. The city cannot pay for the costs of building the new shopping center itself. But with that exception, which of course is a big exception, city can agree to pay for most of the other costs, okay? So either the developer will agree up front to pay all the costs with an agreement that he will be repaid over time by the city, or if the developer can't do that, the city will agree to issue bonds early on in the process and borrow enough money to pay for whatever costs the city is going to take responsibility for, okay? So the agreement is put in place, maybe the city issues bonds, borrows money, the developer comes in, starts buying up land. Pretty soon, you've got a new shopping center. And what happens when that old, decrepit, blighted area is now a brand new shopping center? What happens to the property value? It goes up, right? It may triple, may quadruple. Let's assume it goes up 900%, from $1 million to $10 million. Of course, I'm probably off by at least 1 or 2 zeros, right? But let's just use those numbers because it's easy to think about. So the total EAV for this new shopping center is now $10 million. The $1 million in base EAV, right? And $9 million in new increased EAV, what we call incremental EAV, okay? When the county goes to compute the rate for the school district, the property tax rate, the county includes all of the taxable property within the school district. It includes the $1 million in base EAV, does not include the $9 million in incremental EAV, okay? Divides the levy by the total available EAV, including the 1 but not the 9, right? And computes a rate. Then it applies that rate to all of the taxable property within the school district. It applies that rate to both the $1 million in base EAV and the $9 million in incremental EAV. And taxes are paid on all 10 million. But only the taxes from the $1 million in base EAV, only those taxes are sent to the school district and the county and the township and the city and all the other taxing districts, okay? Only the taxes on the base EAV. The taxes that are paid on the incremental EAV, the incremental revenue, right? That is given to the city, not the local taxing districts, to the city to be put into a special fund, the TIF fund. And the city has to use those revenues to make the payments on the bonds that paid for the redevelopment. Okay? So that's how it works. That's how the city has the ability to use future taxes to pay for the costs of redevelopment that created the increase in EAV that created the future taxes. Pretty nifty, right? Really neat. I mean, a really brilliant invention, I think. So that's great, right? That's terrific, because now we've got a brand new shopping center and lots of people are going there and shopping and no more blight and blah, 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 right? Okay. what is required in order to establish a TIF district? Well, there's a fairly complex system laid out in the statute, but basically two things are required. The city council has to conclude, has to do an analysis, an eligibility study, or pay someone to do it. And the eligibility study has to examine 13 blighting factors that are identified in the statute and defined in the statute. And an analysis has to be done to determine whether the properties that are within the proposed TIF district demonstrate or exhibit those blighting factors. And to conclude that this is a blighted area, you have to be able to conclude that there are at least 5 of the 13 factors present in this area. Then there's something called a conservation district, which is when you have an area that's tending toward blight, but not there yet. And it requires a finding that the majority of structures within the TIF district are at least 35 years old, so it has to be an old area, an older developed area. And then if that's true, then you can get away with only 3 blighting factors, okay? But in any event, pursuant to that statutory scheme, a conclusion has to be made, a reasonable conclusion has to be made that there are enough blighting factors present within this area to conclude that it's blighted, okay? And secondly, a conclusion has to be made, a finding has to be made that no redevelopment has taken place in this area in some recent time period, and more important and more difficult, a finding has to be made that no redevelopment will take place in this area in the future unless a TIF district is created there. So in other words, if the city doesn't get actively involved and create the TIF district and start providing some financing for some of the redevelopment costs, everybody believes nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to change. That blighted area is going to sit there blighted for the rest of time. Okay? And if that conclusion is correctly made, then the argument goes, since nothing would happen but for creation of the TIF district, because if no redevelopment would take place, if that blighted area would just sit there blighted for the next 1,000 years, then it's reasonable to conclude the EAV of the properties within that area will not increase. It'll just sit there. The value won't go up, the EAV won't go up, and the taxes won't go up. So the other taxing districts, if the city does create the TIF district, the other taxing districts won't lose any money over that 23-year period, because but for creation of the TIF district, that area would just sit there blighted with a low EAV for those 23 years and more. So there's nothing to lose, right? That's the theory. Let me show you a graph. Oh, that works so well. I love it. This is a graph that you see fairly often in discussions of TIF. And let me just point out a couple of things. This horizontal rectangle, that is showing what is supposed to be the base EAV. And you'll notice that the top line, and this is a graph across time, so the horizontal axis is time in years. You see a mark where the TIF was created, then you see 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and at 23 years the TIF ends, right? The theory, as I said, is that So when the TIF is, well, the theory is that but for creation of the TIF district, nothing would change and the EAV would remain stagnant. In other words, it wouldn't increase at all. That's why this line here that I'm pointing to is horizontal. It's not going up, it's not going down. The assumption is it's just going to sit there and not change. And that's what's happening before the TIF district is created. Then a little bit after the TIF district is created, some redevelopment takes place, and now the total EAV starts climbing, right? That's why this top line is rising. And everything above the horizontal line is the incremental EAV, right? That's what goes into the special TIF fund to be used to pay for some of the costs of redevelopment. And then, so that's not available. For 23 years, that triangle of EAV, if you will, is unavailable for creating taxes, for generating taxes for the school districts and the other taxing districts, right? But if the theory is, if the TIF district hadn't been created, that line wouldn't be going up. There wouldn't be a triangle. There wouldn't be anything except that flat horizontal rectangle, right? Okay. And then when the TIF ends, and at the end of the 23 years, then all of that EAV, all of it, we're looking at this large, what is that called now, with 5 sides?
4-side trapezoid.
Oh, it's still 4 sides, isn't it? Yeah. And when 2 sides are parallel,
Trapezoid.
it's a trapezoid. Good. All right. I used to teach math.
Good 2 cents.
Seriously. Anyhow, a little rusty. 5 sides. Anyhow, so this darker shaped object over here, all of that EAV becomes available to the school district after the 23 years. And you get to add it if you're sharp and you're on your toes and you do it at exactly the right time. You get to add all that new EAV to your base, to your EAV. And of course, that's terrific because it's exempt from the tax cap. So in that year when the TIF district is dissolved, boy, your taxes can jump, okay? So that's how it works in a perfect world. Now, do we live in a perfect world? Well, no, we don't, do we? There may be a perfect blighted area someplace, but probably not within sight. Anyhow, let me show you another graph. This is similar to the first graph, but it's also different in some ways. And the idea here was to draw your attention to conditions that might exist and a future that might occur in an area where maybe the blighting isn't quite as perfect as it is in our hypothetical city. And so you notice that before the TIF is created, this line I'm pointing to here is not horizontal. It's increasing somewhat, right? And that's because in the world we live in, property values tend to increase gradually over time. That was always true prior to 2007, right? And it was that unassailable assumption, perhaps, that led in part to the bursting of the housing bubble and the recession and so on. But up until 2007, I certainly believed that every year property values were going to go up. Now, in the last few years, property values have actually come down in some years as a result of the housing bubble bursting and the recession. But I at least think that it is not unreasonable to believe that it won't be too long before they start going up again. And of course, we all hope they do, right, as the economy recovers. And I think most people that I know believe that property values are going to start increasing again, and maybe they already have. I've heard good news, about the housing sector, the housing market. In any event, this graph assumes that it is likely that property values will increase gradually over time, even if there's no new construction. And that is this diagonal line. And so if you have a TIF district created under those circumstances, then what you get is you get a triangle here that is meant to show the increase in EAV, not from new construction, but from the gradual appreciation of property, okay? Secondly, it's my understanding that in the central business district here in Westmont, there has been some construction over the last 23 years. And so it seems possible, well, I'm fairly confident that it's possible, some of you might even say likely, that there will be some construction in that area over the next 23 years, even without a TIF district. We don't know because it's hard to predict the future, right? But I know that some of you are concerned about that. You are concerned that there will be new growth in the central business district over the next 23 years, even without a TIF district. And if that's true, and if a TIF district is created, then this district and the other taxing districts will lose the money, the new taxes that you would have received from that new construction, because the TIF district will prevent you from receiving it. Because everything in this graph above this horizontal line during the life of the TIF district will go into the TIF fund and not come to the school district or other taxing districts. So what this graph does is it shows this middle area here with the cross-hatching, right? And there's an assumption here that that's the sum construction without TIF. That's the second line of the heading. And then finally, the top area in white underneath the top curve, that's supposed to be the more construction with TIF. In other words, that occurs because and only because the village or the city, does spend some money promoting redevelopment. So more redevelopment occurs. More developers are interested, and they come and they build here. Now, obviously, exactly where these lines and curves are in any particular situation depends on the facts on the ground. It depends on all the facts and circumstances in that location, in that village. I'm not trying to suggest that these curves and these lines accurately reflect Westmont. This is just a hypothetical showing how an increase in EAV can be thought of as maybe being divided up into three components. And this triangle, which is from natural appreciation, that may be much thinner because appreciation may be only 1% annually instead of 5% annually, right? And maybe the crosshatched area would be smaller because there really isn't all that much going on. And the area in white at the top, maybe that would be bigger because, I don't know, maybe there are developers who just need a nudge. I don't know. I'm just saying, right? So the concerns are that because new EAV that result from new construction are exempt from the tax cap, the dollars that are reflected by the crosshatched area here would come to a school district but for the creation of the TIF district. So those are dollars that are actually lost when a TIF district is created, assuming there is any of that construction that would occur, right? And the triangle, the shaded triangle here, that is not from new construction, that's just from gradual appreciation, so that is not exempt from the tax cap. So that does not reflect dollars that you would actually lose, but it does reflect EAV that is not available for generating taxes for the school district. And so the dollars that would otherwise be generated by that EAV those taxes now have to be paid by taxpayers who own property within the school district but outside of the TIF district. And so there is something of a shift in taxes from the property owners within the TIF to the property owners outside of the TIF. And those, I think, are the two big concerns that this board has about the proposed TIF district here. Losing some dollars from new growth that would occur anyhow from new construction, and the tax shift to other taxpayers. Okay? Any questions? No questions? Not one. Boy, I must have done a good job. All right. Yes, sir.
Why don't, you know what, Dean, why don't we have him come up to the
Please state your name.
podium and then state your name? And then, Dean, you're going to have to come over here now so that you can be on the microphone. So just give us a moment.
I'm Kerry O'Connor, Westmont resident. You lost me with the discussion of the tax cap, the difference between the shaded area of the triangle and the hatched curve above it. In what way does that shift? Does the shaded area shift the burden to the taxpayers outside the TIF district?
Okay. Let's assume there's no new construction within this area. But let's assume that every year property values increase by 2 or 3%. Just natural appreciation. It used to happen every year before the recession hit. If there weren't any tax cap, if there wasn't a TIF district, then that increase in EAV from that appreciation, that would get included when the tax rate was computed by the county, and it would be included in the EAV for each of the parcels within the TIF district area for purposes of generating taxes for the school district and also taxes for all the other taxing districts, okay? So that EAV would be part of the big pool, the total EAV for the district. But if a TIF district is created, then the EAV that's available to generate taxes for the taxing districts is frozen on the day the TIF district is created. That's the base EAV that I talked about. So the triangle is the area of EAV above that, which is not in the base EAV, it's in the incremental EAV, and the taxes that are generated by that EAV doesn't go to the taxing districts, it goes into the TIF fund that the village will have, right? Mm-hmm. But the school district still is able to levy the same amount of dollars that it would whether or not there's a TIF district. So the school district levies, I don't know what, $50 million. The county now takes that levy and it spreads it across all of the available EAV within the school district. It includes the base EAV within the TIF district, but it doesn't include any incremental EAV, so it doesn't include that triangle.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but when you say levy, that is a dollar amount that the school district requests
Right.
from
the taxpayers.
Gotcha. Okay.
And the county is the agent that implements that.
Okay.
It takes that dollar amount, it receives that levy from the school board, and it computes the rate, and then it computes the dollar amount that each taxpayer within the school district has to pay in order for all of those payments to add up to the total levy. And then it puts those amounts on the tax bills that go out to all the taxpayers,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And that levy amount will be the same even though the TIF district has been created, and even though that triangle is not available for purposes of paying taxes. That means that all of the other taxpayers within the school district have to pay a little bit more. however much money would have been generated by that triangle now has to be paid by taxpayers with property outside of the TIF district.
Okay. So, and as you said, then by that logic, the increase in the EAV in the darker shaded area does not represent a loss to the school district?
Correct.
Because it's taken up by people outside the TIF?
That's right.
Okay. While I have the floor, can I continue to ask questions?
Go right
Okay.
ahead, please.
I didn't catch who are you here on behalf of?
I am an attorney representing the school district.
School district, okay. You mentioned the criteria for rating whether an area is blighted or not, headed that way. Do we know, has that already been decided for Westmont?
Well, Westmont commissioned a firm to do an eligibility study, and that firm has prepared a report and has concluded that the proposed TIF district qualifies under the statute.
Okay. Would that, under the currently blighted or headed towards blight, or?
Headed towards blight.
Okay.
Yes, they've determined that more than 50% of the structures are more than 35 years old, and that there are at least 3 blighting factors that occur in this area. Those are their findings.
Okay. The graph you have up on the screen, do you know who prepared it, or?
This particular graph?
Yeah,
I think I might have,
okay,
but it's been a few years, so I'm not 100% sure.
okay. I'm just, obviously, this all hinges on seeing the future, as you said, and I'm assuming that most of this stuff progresses based on historical comparisons, and when I look at this, it seems like basically the potential taxes, I guess, that might be missed out on by the school district is the difference between the vertically hatched area and the shaded area. In the absence of a TIF district, the school district would see the middle line, that increase.
The crosshatched area.
Yeah. When I look at it, it seems as though the school district would miss out on almost half of that total incremental EAV with the TIF district.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to imply too much with this graph.
Okay. And that's my question. Does anyone know like what these relative proportions are? When I look at this, I see basically deferring 23 years of benefit from the increase in property, deferring that for 23 years over really a very small amount of increase in the EAV as a result of the TIF. I mean, I look at this graph and I don't see a great deal of benefit to the TIF in exchange for 23 years of deferred.
Well, you should really take a look at the plan that the village has prepared. Currently, and I have the document with me, if you'd like, I can find it for you, but my recollection, and perhaps some of the staff up here or the board members will remember this, my recollection is that in the TIF plan that was prepared by the village's consultant, they report that the total EAV within the proposed TIF district is currently about $38 million. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
Okay. They conclude in their report that it is not likely that there will be any significant redevelopment within this area within the next 23 years. However, they conclude that with the TIF district promoting redevelopment, that the total EAV at the end of 23 years will be over $300 million.
Yeah, I saw that in the handout that was distributed in the invite here. That struck me as surprising. I don't know anything about valuation like that, but does that sound like a good number? I mean, is that reasonable? That seemed unbelievable to me, that over 23 years it would increase that much.
I was surprised that it was that large, but I'm not in a position to evaluate it.
Okay. All right, I think that's all I had. Thank you.
We have the same information that everyone has, and we have hired we have our attorneys to kind of give us, the legal opinions on this. So, the documents that the village prepares, they are there. So we're just trying to understand
Gotcha.
from our perspective.
Okay, thank you.
And I assume that everyone in the audience knows that the district and the school board have been involved in negotiations with the village recently, attempting to address these concerns, and hoping that there will be an agreement reached that will mitigate any adverse financial impact to the district.
Joe Steger, 126 South Wilmette. I was listening to you, and you were saying that the money would be dispersed to the other people from the levy. You get, what, 5% a year increase or whatever you get? If the other people are paying, how's the school losing? I see your graph and stuff. It looks like you'd lose.
Okay.
But if everybody else is paying more,
Yeah, there are two concerns. The first concern is represented by that triangle.
yeah.
The school district doesn't lose money as a result of that. That, though, causes other taxpayers outside of the TIF district to pay a little bit more so that the school district doesn't lose money, okay? However, if there is or would be new construction within the proposed TIF district, even without creating a TIF district, then that new EAV would be,
That's what they're losing?
that's what they're losing.
Okay.
For purposes of generating tax dollars right away, because new EAV resulting from construction is considered new growth under the tax code and is exempt from the tax cap. So if a big new building is built in the absence of a TIF district, then, and the EAV triples, then the district can expect to get 3 times as much in taxes from that property the very next year. So there's going to be an increase in taxes as a result of that new construction right away and for every year after that. But it won't happen if there's a TIF district in place.
So if the TIF district goes actually opposite, does the village have to reimburse you guys for losses?
Wait, if the TIF
If the values
district,
don't go up and they go down?
oh,
No.
no,
I'm in Lamont, I'm in a TIF district where my business is.
Yes.
They built a nice 5-story building and it's all vacant on the bottom, so it really didn't do anything for the town.
So
It's taking the money from the one school district and they're in trouble. But also I'd like to know if the district don't like it, can they stop the process or they're powerless?
if no agreement is reached, then the school district does not have the power to prevent the village board from creating the TIF district. But if the school board had a reasonable belief that the TIF district did not qualify, then it could challenge the TIF district in court. That would be its only recourse.
Yeah, because I'd rather see my money go to the kids than to some developer if I'm paying more.
I would like to interject one thing here, just on behalf of the board, especially since I've been involved in this. We are working
Oh, yeah, I know, I was at that
with
voting,
with the village, and I would like to say that we are progressing along, okay? And we're hoping that the outcome will be a mutual beneficial agreement, intergovernmental agreement between the school district and the village. And so we have been working very hard to do that. And a lot of effort is going into that. And we will let our community know as soon as we're hopeful that that progresses along, so that we are not in a position to,
Yeah, because I'd hate to see someone get fired because some developer gets some more money.
thank you.
Hi, me again. What avenues are you attempting to, what agreements are you attempting to reach with the village regarding minimizing the impact of the TIF district on the school?
Well, I guess I'll just say we can't divulge that right now, but we
Better not to.
Yeah, I'm just saying, but know that we wouldn't enter into an agreement that we didn't feel was beneficial to our school. Right?
Can you give any examples of what has been done in other, I mean, I can't even begin to guess.
Yeah, sure. There are districts, there are places where the municipality has agreed to reduce the size of the proposed TIF district so that it will have a less of an impact on other taxing districts. I'm aware of a village that agreed to reduce or limit the length of time that the TIF district would be in place. I'm familiar with a village that agreed to limit the amount of money that would be financed through the TIF district to a specific dollar amount because there was one and only one project that was going to be accomplished as a result of the TIF district. It was a hotel, a resort on a lake within that village. There are agreements that have been reached in which the municipality has agreed to guarantee a certain amount of surplus each year. That would be revenue, TIF revenue, that wouldn't be used for TIF purposes, but which could then be distributed to all of the taxing districts on a pro rata basis. There are agreements where a municipality has agreed to pay certain amounts of money to one taxing district where that money would be used for certain capital costs incurred by the taxing district within the TIF district. And then there are agreements where a municipality has agreed to pay dollars to a particular tax district as consideration for that taxing district agreeing not to sue the city or village and challenge the TIF district.
And where does that money come from?
It has to come from non-TIF revenue.
Okay. And then my last question is, in the instance where bonds are issued upfront, you're essentially basically borrowing against future tax revenue. Has it ever happened where overborrowing occurred, where the increase in the property value did not cover, the amount of borrowing?
Yes.
Is that a danger? That has happened. In which case, the TIF essentially backfired.
Well, yes and no. Certainly, under those circumstances, I'm sure everyone would agree the TIF had not been as successful as hoped for. The community would still get the benefit of whatever redevelopment had occurred, but the price would be higher than expected.
All right, thank you.
Jonathan Templeton, Westmont resident. I believe you addressed it a little bit, but you can create a hybrid TIF zone. It doesn't have to be in for a period of 23 years. Can you extend it or decrease it as?
You have to, when you create the TIF district, the village would decide what length of time initially. Most often that's 23 years because there's an assumption that the financing may require that much time.
Yeah, the bond issue going forward. And
Yeah.
I had a couple of questions on that. Can you make those bonds callable by the village if we decide that extra money gets thrown in? You can have that bond called and then eliminate the TIF district?
I believe so. And to answer your other question, there is a provision in the TIF Act for extending the life of the TIF district up to an additional 12 years. And that has been done in a number of communities, but that requires an act of the legislature.
Okay. And one last thing. You did address it if something gets built outside of the original developer's development, a halo effect occurs that development would also benefit from the TIF. Is there a way to call that out or etch that out during negotiations that it falls in regardless because it is a zoning?
Well, it falls in regardless because it's within the TIF district.
Okay.
Now, would it be possible at some point during the life of the TIF for the village and the taxing districts to come to some arrangement to address the situation you've just described, perhaps? But it's hard, it would be hard to address specifically in advance because we don't know what's going to happen.
Right, you can't claw back that revenue in case it shows up. Okay, thank you.
Sure. And I suspect that the village would argue that if what you have suggested happened, that would actually be a result of the TIF district, because the halo effect was the halo effect. But for the TIF district, the original development wouldn't occur, and if the original development hadn't occurred, then the next door neighbor development wouldn't occur either, right? I mean, that's...
Well, I didn't know if you could say, 5 years moving forward, anything after that doesn't fall within the original TIF agreement, but has to be set within the amount of years that you put forward, I guess. Whether it be 10, 15, 23.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. Just questions.
Hello, my name is Dan Chanel. I'm a Miller parent. I just have one question and a comment, and I'm probably speaking to the choir here. It seems absolutely ludicrous to me that that Westmont is trying to address a need by taking away from the goods of others, especially children in this district. I'm baffled by this, and I'm heartened to see that all of you are working toward this. To me, this is a social justice issue, and taking away from children is a bad thing. And so I would just encourage all of you to keep up with the discussions. Really, my question is more of a simple one: is when is the village planning on making this decision? Is it something they just decide? Is there something that can be voted on? I'm one of those parents that doesn't mind going in and telling people what I think and not really caring, how it's received. But this upsets me a little bit. I understand what they want to try and do is they're trying to prevent Westmont from sliding into a blight, and that's a good thing. But they're doing it, what seems to me, in a way that's not equitable at all. So when is this decision planning to be made?
The process is as follows. There is a public hearing scheduled for the evening of May 20th.
Okay.
And that public hearing was continued once. It could be continued again. It could be continued several times. I'm not sure how that will go.
Okay.
At some point, the public hearing will be closed.
Mm-hmm.
After the public hearing is closed, then it's up to the village board. And in order to create the TIF district, the village board would need to pass 3 ordinances. They work together. It's really a single decision, but 3 ordinances. And they can pass those 3 ordinances no sooner than 14 days after the public hearing is closed, but no longer than 90 days after the public hearing is closed.
Okay.
So there's a window, a fairly long window of time within which the village board would have to take those actions.
Is there a plan for ongoing discussions between the board and the village during that time? I mean, at what point do they say, we're done talking to you? I don't even know if that's how it works.
Well, not yet.
Okay.
We're moving forward.
Okay.
We are progressing. I will say that.
Okay. Thank you.
So,
Dan, I will mention that the next village meeting is May 20th.
Okay.
I don't know if you had mentioned the date, but
Yeah.
Monday, May 20th is the
Monday.
next village meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
I want to make a few quick points on this. First of all, I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page. When we're looking at this graph, again, this section here, the hatched section, is the perceived loss, that the money that the school might otherwise get were the TIF not in place. But that, these lines don't have numbers. These aren't necessarily proportional. If this section ends up being very thin throughout, then the school would lose very little. If that number is wider, the school could lose a lot. And the village is coming from a standpoint that they believe that section wouldn't even exist, or it would be minimal. So they're not trying to do something necessarily where they're taking money away from us. They think that money wouldn't come in no matter what, so it wouldn't be available. So this is to communicate a point, but we don't know where it would be at. we look at it and we say that, we don't think it's going to be baseline. We think there would be some increase, and that increase would probably be above just the natural amount. We think there would probably be some development. So that's really where the negotiating comes in with them, and trying to come out with, given that no one can see into the future, what do we think it could be? What do they think it could be? How can we negotiate something that comes to a fair balance between the two, but still allows the school to progress and the village to try to do something to advance the village itself. A few other points I think that just are kind of relevant. One is that any growth in the village, more kids coming to the school, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the village has an obligation to support that increase in students at some level. So some money would come from them to support an increase in student population. The other thing that's interesting in this case is that the village included Manning School in the TIF district, which was not our doing, and I know there's been some talk about, well, why did the school district want Manning in the TIF, and that wasn't our decision, but it is there. So it's just kind of an interesting side note.
And I would just say, too, that, the majority of us here live in Westmont, and, we are all interested in seeing the growth of Westmont. We are, this board and our administrators and our attorneys, we have a double position here because we have to think about the school district. And so it is very hard to see into the future. So, it was very important for us to have this meeting and to get this information out to our community because of the fact that it is happening. But I just have to say with utmost sincerity that we are looking out for the long-term effects of this with the village, because we can't look into the future. Nobody can. But I think if you try to work together, then we can try to find something that's mutually beneficial for everybody. So you're not preaching to the choir, but I just really want to say, you are. But we are working very hard to try to do this. But we felt that it was really time to let our community know what was happening because this is progressing along. And we're hoping to find something that will work for us. So we are not in a position of any faction of that being a loss. And do you, as long as Matt said that, do you want to talk about that piece about the students that's in the TIF Act?
Yeah,
Just so that,
okay, sure. Yeah, there's a special provision in the TIF Act, in the statute, that says that that if there are net new students within the TIF district, in other words, assuming that there are some students living within that area now, but that as a result of the TIF district, there are new children, new families who move into the area because there are new residential units built, and the net result is that with some people moving out and some people moving in, there's a net increase in the number of students, then the village shall reimburse the school district for the costs of educating those net new students. So those costs would come back to the district from the village, from the TIF revenue.
Dean, is that just a one-year thing?
No, that's for the life of the TIF.
That's for the life of the TIF, okay.
Does it have to be new construction?
I believe it does. I believe it has to be.
Like a new building
I
as
believe it
opposed
has
to
to be
remodel?
residential units that have benefited from TIF assistance.
Okay.
and that is in the statute. So
Yes.
that isn't something that we have to work with the village on. That is just in the statute. So we would, any costs to educate
Those
these
students,
new
we would be
students.
entitled to be reimbursed.
Yes, right.
Dan Charleston, I just had one question. Obviously, the village, Matt, thank you for the conversation about that lined area. Obviously, the village is asserting that without the TIF, that lined area would be, as you pointed out, very thin. By the way, I'm excited about La Petite Suite opening up really soon, and about the Neat Bar and Grill opening really soon, and of course the Westmont Dance Center. That's exciting as well. Having said that, obviously the village is asserting there's going to be little or no new growth. This is out here, I think, the busiest Metra train line in the city, in the metropolitan area. And so, there's, God only knows how many people go through on the train line. Has the district hired or thought about hiring a consultant to look at the question over the next 20 years, and given the focus on transit-oriented design, how much new growth would occur lacking a TIF?
So what you're suggesting is kind of the reverse of what the village has done, right? The
Asking
village has,
if the district has considered that, should it consider that? I would assert you should seriously consider finding a development consultant who could look at that question, particularly in light of there's a couple sites that are immediately in the TIF that are ready to have stuff put on them, including that little empty lot across the tracks at what is that, Burlington and Lincoln? That's my daughter. There you go. Anyway, thank you very much for your hard work, and I'll suggest you might look at that.
I'll just answer that just briefly in that, again, it needs to be stated again that we are not our school board and administration are not part of the decision-making process as to how the TIF works. The sole decision to vote on the TIF will be the village board. So all we can do is work with the village to come up with a mutually beneficial agreement for us, short of any completely mitigating litigation factors. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows this isn't like a decision that we're going to be making with the village. Like, this decision is theirs to make only. So, I just want to say that.
I just wanted to, Dean mentioned a couple of different times the taxing districts. So the school district isn't the only taxing body or taxing district that is potentially affected, but I think it's interesting to note that of the districts like the College of DuPage, Forest Preserve District, Downers Grove Sanitary District, and there's a list that's in the document that the village has created, the school district receives over 70% of its revenue from property tax. The impact to every other taxing district is 1.5%, 2% of their total revenue that they take in. And at one point, somewhere, and I've been searching and I can't find, they gave us a chart that showed each taxing district what the percent was. And I remember being, quite surprised to realize that 70% of our revenue comes from property tax. Every other taxing district that's impacted, it's 1%, 1.5%, 2%, 2.5%. So when we talk about how important this is to the taxing districts, the impact to the school district that is within a TIF is obviously significantly greater and notable versus the impact to all of the remaining taxing districts. For people that aren't as aware, haven't been, reading every of the 80 or 90 or 100 pages worth of documents, I think that's an important item to note as we work on negotiating with the village, is just understanding the impact to the schools versus every other taxing district or taxing body.
So just one other quick question. Does the district or any other party have a right to contest the findings of the eligibility of the TIF district?
Well, there is something called the Joint Review Board that is convened pursuant to the TIF Act.
Yeah.
Which includes a representative from each of 6, in this particular case, each of 6 taxing bodies: the county, the township, the village, the College of DuPage, the Park District, and District 201.
Understood.
And that board has an opportunity to review the proposed TIF district and to vote as to whether it qualifies under the statute. That group voted 5-1 that it did. Other than that, none of the taxing districts have input into the decision of whether to create the TIF district, except possibly after the fact through the courts.
Through the courts. So other parties can raise the question of the validity of the eligibility finding via the courts. Thank you.
Well, and just the 5-1, we were the one. So I suppose that was.
Just in case there's any doubt.
That was, but that goes along with what Shannon is saying as to why why you've all been getting emails and backpack mail, because we just really need to make sure that everybody is aware the importance and that we are absolutely working on this.
Joe Steeker, I was wondering, if the Manning's in the TIF district, would you be able to get funds to like do the security for the office and stuff through the funds from the village instead of using your funds?
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Well, since Manning is in the TIF district, would you
Yes.
be able to get funds from the village to pay for improvements at the school?
That is possible. That is authorized under the TIF Act. And TIF funds can be used to renovate or improve public buildings
Within the TIF district only.
within the TIF district.
Come out with more money than you are losing?
That seems unlikely, but not impossible.
It's a really nice idea, though. And just to clarify again, that money, if it were available, can only be spent on properties within the TIF district. So of the 5 properties that we manage and are responsible for, unfortunately, in this case, only 1 falls within the TIF district. So. Sure, always better to have something than nothing, but, obviously as a board, we have a responsibility to represent the entire district and try and, find a negotiated agreement, as Marie mentioned, that, tries to address the needs of all of our students, so.
Okay, are there any other questions? Please.
How are you? I'm Renee Mummy, Westmont resident also. So is it the intention for the board to, I guess first, is Manning the only school that's in the proposed district?
Yeah.
So is it the intention to pull Manning out of the district? Because I understand that's what happened, is it Marker? For the Marker school, that TIF is still in place or was passed, I believe, but the Marker school was pulled out. So what's the advantage of pulling a school out or making the TIF district smaller versus potentially driving more business to our town that's suffering, frankly?
In the case of the proposed Southwest Westmont TIF district, the junior high school down there in the Marker district was not in the TIF district. It was immediately adjacent to it.
Okay.
And at one point, there was some discussion of amending the borders to include it. But instead, a decision was made to reduce the size of that TIF district by removing those areas that were south of 63rd Street, which is where the junior high school is located. So by removing all of the land south of 63rd Street from that TIF district, that precluded including the junior high school. And the idea behind reducing the size of a TIF district was that you reduce the impact that it will have on the school district. In that case, the reduction resulted in reducing the size by approximately 40%. So it was a significant reduction.
So is it the goal of the board and the negotiations that you're having with the village, or conversations, is it the goal to eliminate, to not have a TIF district in place at all, or to reduce the size of the TIF district?
Well, I think in this case, the negotiations have not gone in either of those directions.
Wasn't it one or the other? None, or smaller, or?
No, there have been other things discussed. Rather than, in other words, the negotiations anticipate that there will be a TIF district, and the negotiations have not centered on, if you permit me to say so? You would prefer I don't?
Yes.
Okay.
So I think I would say that our goal is to have the best outcome for the village and for the school district. So we potentially lose, and we have gone to the village and said, this is our potential loss, and how can you help us? Because we definitely see benefit in the village being successful. Obviously, that benefits all of us. So, I think your question, you gave an either or, and there are 10, 15, 20, 30 options, not just those two. But it's not our goal to derail the success and planning and achievement within the village. Our goal and our responsibility as a school board is to protect and be good financial stewards of the school district. And Marie alluded to, in spite of our own personal residential desires to have the village be successful, our role on the board requires that we, be financial champions for
And
the
that's
district.
fair, and I appreciate that, frankly. I guess then I would question, does the board feel that the village trustees do not have that outlook and goal of financially improving our village? And like it sounds to me like you're countering something, and I would expect that both sides had the well-being of our village in their hands and what the intention is.
I will just say, as being, and not overstepping our bounds, is that, there's been a number of studies done by the village, and many people in the community want the central business to do something. There's been a lot of...
Anything,
right.
frankly.
So, I'm not going to speak on behalf of the village. They will sit here another night, and they do that very well. But we are the taxing body that would be the one to lose the most. So I will say, we are working with them. I don't think that there's any, confrontation. I don't think that there's any, there's no unnecessary drama here. I think we have leaders that are trying to work together to come up with something. I would tell you that I don't think any one of us would agree to something that we didn't think would be to the detriment of our schools. And so, as Dean has been educating us, we can't say you can't do it.
Right.
But we can sit and discuss, which we've been doing.
Right, and I do appreciate that. So, and is it Dean? Did you represent the South District also? Was that?
I represented Marker.
Marker, okay. So, and then thank you, Matt, for pointing out, while the graph is okay, directionally speaking, I think it's very misleading that it makes it look like, the parents of 201 need to come in here and start marching at the trustees and saying, this is unacceptable. But that is very misleading. It's a very misleading graph because I don't know if you can put better context to it. I mean, I don't know. I just don't think that it's a fair graph to say it looks awful like that. We're going to lose a lot of money for our students, but it might not be anything like that.
To be fair, and most things like this, when you don't have numbers and you're extrapolating future, it's to illustrate the point. And also, there's the onset, since we don't know where it is, it could be worse than that. Or it could be a lot better than that. We don't know. So I think, what you're seeing is the lines are exaggerated, but they're kind of evenly spaced, things like that. I think it's the point across with something that is visual. I understand what you're saying. You don't want to unnecessarily, scare people. But I do think it's a good representation, even if the scale is not based on anything necessarily.
I think the scale is important, though, and it's also
Can I make
assuming.
one comment
Sure.
about the other thing I would say is within the document that the village has created, they do have a lot of numbers and information on their projections, and we've all discussed extensively how it's a crystal ball. I mean, you don't really know. We could make that look anyway, but I think the best thing is to look at what the village. They have a huge document that says, based on our studies and our goals and all this, we think, X amount of dollars of growth, and that gives you at least the top line, that middle, the hash mark area, that is completely right. But the top line is very well documented in their information and gives you, if those things were to come true, because again, that's just a proposal, what their goal is. But if those things were to come true, there is a specific dollar amount that you can hold on to that, we potentially don't have this revenue for 23 years, or for the number of years that new growth exists. So,
And the flip of that is that we'd get the development anyway, frankly.
that's that middle line.
I've been here, well, I can't
that's
see
what it
that happening. I can't even see that happening as it is. I see nothing move in this village. I see things move out more than they move in, and it's frustrating, frankly. So part of me, while I understand that, I think I took away that you were against the TIF, anything that can stimulate any sort of growth in this village that is suffering and people are moving out, myself included. I'm right now, I have a 1-year-old that is, do I stay and renovate and build a bigger house that can fit a 1-year-old, and or do I move out to somewhere else that has a thriving development? So I am actually for the TIF. I support it. I think that if it's anything to put an injection into this village, and I will be my daughter will be in within the next 23 years. Hopefully she's in and out within 23 years, right? I just struggle with graphs like that, and I think it's just somewhat misleading.
Well, let me add something here. When we gave information to our community, our school community, the only information we have is given to us from the village. So the numbers that the village expert has stated as would be this, if we didn't have a TIF, it would be here. But with the TIF, it will be here. So when we are giving information to our school community, we want everybody to know what it is we're looking at, what we are being told. So when we are being told these facts and figures, we have a business manager working 24/7, we've got attorneys. We're trying to figure out, okay, I don't know that anyone is sitting here saying we are opposed to the TIF. What we are saying is, if their expert is correct, that number could be way up there. So that's why this is so important. And this isn't like, again, it is that crystal ball. Maybe, maybe not. There's a recession, there's not a recession. Who knows? Everyone in this room might have their own opinion on that. All we can do as the school board is make sure that if that number is way up there, we don't lose that, that we are not in a position to lose that money.
Right, and that affects the high school and the junior high also, not just Manning.
Right, even though, you're correct, because even though Manning is in the TIF, the taxes do affect the whole district. So that is.
And how does TIF, so this doesn't necessarily relate to the school board, I guess, but how does TIF affect, I hear rumblings of, okay, well, if TIF is in place, then I, as a property owner, my taxes are gonna go up to make up for the difference. Now, I do see my tax, it's 70% of my taxes are going to the school as it is. It would be a damn shame for me to send my kid to a private school and pay the 70%. I'll cross that bridge when I have to. So would the other properties have to pick up the difference to help the schools anyway? So wouldn't my taxes end up going up with the TIF if all goes according to what's being discussed?
Yes.
And
So-
that's the shaded area here. Since that money would not come to us from the TIF district, it
And
would
that's
be
assuming that my
reallocated.
property value goes up 2 to 3% every year, right?
Well,
2.5
That's
is the number.
how you'd presented that?
The estimate is 2.5%.
There's been an estimate of 2.5%. Who knows?
It's just to come up with the numbers,
Sure.
right? The village has used a 2.5%. I think we've used a 2.5%. It's looking at past however many years of average. Yeah.
And
I
that's a
mean,
23-year graph? Okay.
Right. The other thing, too, I think to note here is, we all know what our tax bill looks like. But the only way the school district gets money is from property tax. The village has taxes and other other revenue streams. We don't have that. And we are also dependent upon the state and the federal government, which we're
Right.
losing by the minute. So,
That speaks for itself.
Right.
so we are, I guess, very protective of our taxes because we all have taken an oath to be financially responsible with your and our tax money. So therefore, that's why this is important. So that's all we can do. We can't start selling something and start, doing that. That's the only thing we have, and that's by law. So we're kind of stuck there. So there's nothing else we can do.
I think we also have to mention, the TIF will be great for the downtown business area, but I don't think that's the only factor people consider when they decide to move to a community. Certainly one deciding point that a family would be looking at, a family with children, is the quality of the schools. And so I think it is my goal as a board member to make sure that the progress in the village doesn't impede the progress we're making in our school system. In a few minutes, we're going to be talking about a brand-new early childhood center. I can't see that not being a plus to our broader community to say, as something unique that we have that will draw families to our community. So it's not just, it's a real balance that we have to have with what the village thinks will move the community forward and what the school district thinks will move the community forward. And we need to make sure we're not stepping on each other's toes as we dance that dance, so that, it really works in harmony to make our community a great place to reside.
That's fair, thank you. So one other note, because my daughter is only one, I found out about this meeting through the WRA's Facebook page. Is there a way, just as a recommendation or for the board, to somehow reach out to parents, families that don't have students in the district yet, but will be, so those that live, and I don't know, maybe it's the WRA's Facebook page, but there should be other ways, or are you communicating in other ways that I just haven't come across yet?
We sent it to the paper, but the paper doesn't come out till tomorrow. And so we did, they do have an online version. They did not put it there. So it is, you have a very valid point, and I know there's a District 201 Friends page that I know people have been talking about that, and so there is.
I found out about that, so I do admittedly need to loop into that too. It's just, I know, I just happened, I'm sure there's other new young families that are in the village that would have loved, I've been to a lot of village meetings that there's like 7 of us here. It's a shame.
Well,
but there are people that do want to get involved.
Our meetings are televised, so people can either watch at home, you can watch it on playback, you can watch it on cable, you can, so I do know that a lot of people are paying attention.
Right, and I've watched on YouTube too, but just as a note, it would be good to be able to get the word out to other new families in the village that want to get involved before their kids are even involved.
Can I just make one quick suggestion?
Certainly.
If you go to the district website, you can sign up for the Community Unit School District 201 blog, and anytime this news comes out, it would come out on a blog, and you'd get an email about it. And I understand it doesn't help the greater community, but
Sure.
if you could do that, maybe suggest it to your friends.
I will.
I know when we put it in the paper, I kept looking every day online, hoping to see it on there, but it never came out, so.
Yeah, and frankly, I read that paper sometimes a week later anyway,
Yeah.
so let's be
I
honest.
definitely suggest you do that.
Okay, great. All right, thank you for time.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other, yeah?
Can you explain what the logic is of including Manning in TIF district? Because that seems like robbing Peter to pay Paul.
We didn't do it.
Is it strictly a logistic thing, like it has to go street to street? And because, no?
Parcel to parcel, right?
That would be a question for the village then?
On the documents that we're referring to, it shows all the boundaries for the TIF. It's in
And
the-
is that available on the village's website?
Yes.
It is, yeah.
Right. Okay, thank you.
And actually related to that, but also to your comment, whether or not Manny's in the TIF, and correct me if I'm wrong, really impacts obviously the size of the TIF, but whether it's Manning or whether it's some other building, the only thing that really changes is whether or not Manning is eligible for any of that money. So if Manning were across the street from the TIF and some other building were there, we would just not be eligible for TIF money in the same way. But, so, you had kind of asked, would we want to reduce the size? Would we want Manning to be, outside the TIF area, anything like that? The fact that Manning's in the TIF area is, I think, I wasn't on the board when that was actually announced, but I think it was pretty surprising. But I don't think we view it as a detriment. So whether Manning's in, size is an influencing factor, as you'd mentioned. All the different things Dean mentioned that different villages have done to negotiate. And I think that negotiation is one of the reasons that the press release that's coming out tomorrow is just at where it's at. I think we've been negotiating at the village. There's been a lot of back and forth. There's been a lot of hard work on both sides. I think everyone on both sides had hoped to be at a resolution sooner. And I think it is progressing, and we're getting very close, but that's, I think, why there wasn't a sooner press release.
And it's not any intent to scare anybody, it's just factual. And any of the numbers and charts that we're putting out were just, it's informational. And that's why we have decided to have this tonight, for people to be able to get your questions answered and hear Dean explain this complicated financing. So, okay, are there any other questions? So we will use all resources that we can to continue to let our community know. And again, our CUSD201.org is our website. If we will continue to reach out to the newspapers and such and send out blogs. And, we did decide to make a decision to do backpack mail because, sometimes your kids show it to you, sometimes they don't. There's blogs, so we tried to cover all bases. So we are really trying to reach out to the most, the biggest group of people that we can. So welcome to the district, and we will keep everybody informed.
I'm sorry, real quick, before I stop, I also want to say thank you for one of your opening points when you stood up and when you said you've got a 1-year-old and you're saying, should I invest in remodeling or should I be looking at going somewhere else? And that's exactly, I think, tied in with the point Joel was making. There's a big balance in what draws people here and what keeps them here. A great downtown is nice and great schools are also nice, so there's a balancing act, and that's exactly the point that we're making. So, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if do the board members have any other? No.
I just wanted to comment the document on the village website. You have to look a little bit, but if you go under documents and forms, and then there's a folder called community development, and then you'll see TIF information, and you drill in and keeping in mind there were 2 proposed TIFs, right? So the southern end and then this one. So obviously make sure you're picking, if you're interested in this TIF information, but the document that they have up there, which also includes the maps of what properties and parcels are included, if you're patient for a minute and kind of go through documents and forms and then community development, you will find their master document, which we all received as well.
Okay, thank you very much. And that will conclude the forum then on this tip. We will be getting information out as things develop. Okay, then moving on to the next item on the agenda. Thank you, Dean, and you'll stay around. Please. Thank you. The consent agenda, we are removing one item. If it is under related information. So that is being removed for
I'm
purposes.
sorry, Marie, what?
One more time? Yeah.
If you're on personnel recommendations,
Yep.
under the consent agenda, under related information,
Administrative content? Marie?
administrative content, yes,
Okay.
I'm sorry. And then it says related information. We're removing that
Okay.
from the discussion tonight, okay? So, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
So moved.
Second.
And roll call, please.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes?
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Knapbush?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Okay, Then the next item on the agenda, review and award of asbestos abatement bid.
You know what, I think we probably should award the general contractor bid, because without that, we won't need the abatement.
All right, then we'll go
We
to number
reverse
2.
that order, would be good.
That's a good point. Okay, review and award of general contractor bid, and we have Mr. Steve Cashman here.
Well, good evening, everyone. I know you all received the bid recommendation letter that I worked on with the administrative team, and I just want to kind of give you an overview versus going through all the details of it, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Back to when we met before, we were talking about the project, and it was out to bid. We, in order to solicit interest in the project, we contacted just under a dozen contractors that have done work for our firm or have worked within the district while we've been your architect. We contacted 10 of them. We had 3 other firms contact us through seeing the public notice in the paper or through one of the plan services. We held a mandatory pre-bid meeting on the 17th of April. Of that group that contacted us and that we gave documents to, 7 attended the meeting. Which we were pleased because they were mostly firms that we were familiar with or that we had good recommendations or had a good, reviewed well in the market. In the end, we had a pre-bid meeting. We walked through all the bid requirements and the documents. We toured the project area. A week later, they were required, if they were interested in bidding on the project, they submitted a pre-qualification package to us. On that day, we received 5 packages from firms. And then on bid day, we had a bid opening, and we had 5 firms that responded and had bids. The bids were kind of interesting. We talked before how we had a strategy of a base bid plus 6 additive alternates so that you could tailor the total project and what you go forward with to meet your budgetary requirements. The base bid is basically the renovation of the corridors, the main classroom wing, where we're taking 5 classrooms and converting those into 3 early childhood spaces with support space, office, meeting space, and a library. Alternate bid number 1 was to renovate the gymnasium to create a 4th classroom and an indoor gross motor area. And then we had some other alternate bids, replacing glazing and exterior doors to improve safety, replacing the entrance doors, removing some casework in the classrooms. So we have the 6 additive alternates. Depending upon what strategy we went with, it basically varied between 2 of the bidders. D. James Builders, they've worked in the district back in 2009. They did a series of projects in the high school area. And then Sagalis and Associates, who I had the pleasure of working with this last summer on a $2 million renovation at St. Viator High School. So we were kind of pleased that these 2 were the low bidders, depending on how you went forward, because they're both decent firms and we have direct experience with them. What we're recommending is accepting the base bid plus 2 additive alternates. Let's see if I move this over a little bit. And deferring, and I'd like actually maybe Linda and Kim can talk more about alternate number 1 and why we're not recommending it at this time, which is adding that 4th classroom, because that gets into issues as far as staffing and growing the program, which are beyond my area of expertise. So we're basically looking at the base bid and then adding alternate number 2, which is replacing glazing in the exterior entry doors and side lights. You have varying different types of glazing, and there's some conditions we think as an early childhood center, this will improve the safety for the students and also make the building more secure. So we're recommending reglazing that. And then in the 2 classrooms, the existing kindergarten room, which is on the west, and in the what will be classroom number 3, in the northeast corner, there's some existing metal casework from the original building that, as this alternate bid number 5, that gets removed, and we basically refinish that portion of the corridor wall with new steel studs, gypboard, electrical work to provide a more flexible space for the teachers. And with that overview, I'd be more than happy, any questions, and get into greater detail.
The interior bathrooms here, I mean, obviously, you're talking about all the bathrooms in these 3 new classrooms, but are these 3 restrooms here in base bid 1, 2, the original
No.
base bid? No,
No.
so we're not doing anything to these?
We're changing one of the restrooms to basically become a visitor's restroom.
Okay.
And the other ones, in our grand, longer view, this is looking out for more years, when this could be a bigger program and maybe need a nurse on site. We were looking at renovating that area and changing plumbing, but at this point, we're basically not addressing those areas.
Okay.
And Gary, when we do, the plan is to do alternate 1 next summer, so to renovate the gym and make that space into a classroom and the gross motor room, and then would renovate the bathrooms at that time as well.
So that's actually in base alternate bid 1?
Well, it wasn't quite in this, but.
Not in this
but
package, but.
Not the way that this was presented, but that's what we would be doing.
And that is something we'll be talking about in a couple minutes with the other programming? Is that what-
Yes.
yeah, okay.
Steve, could you talk a little bit about alternate 3? The existing west steel entrance door and frames, replacing those with the thermally broken aluminum storefront?
Correct. The reason we looked at that, I mean, you have basically the original construction, which are non-broken steel frames, single glazed doors. With that area becoming more of a waiting area, so you'd have, parents and children sitting there. It was just an idea to make it more comfortable, because right now, no one's really in that space during the day. They come in, they go, but they're, in a single glazed door with no vestibule, there's a lot of infiltration. So it was really for comfort, and then for, also would allow us the ability to create a vestibule, which is required by the International Energy Conservation Code, but it would just make it more comfortable. When we looked at this dollar amount, we just felt like with other more pressing needs, that at this time, we didn't have to do it. And a big question was, could this be done later? And the answer is yes.
So not a major impact to security
No.
at all?
No, no change at all for security.
Okay, got it.
So we just thought that, if we could even choose to do it next year and make it part of the project, it would not disrupt everything we do this coming summer.
Sure, okay. Thank you.
Can we talk about that, and if you can pull it up, that we talked about, and I know Gary asked some questions in that new security door and side lights with card reader.
Right.
And there was some discussion about, so that is in the bid.
That's part of this, and to follow up with Gary's suggestion, once we award a contract, we're going to basically solicit a proposal request to the contractor to see what is that cost and impact, before we even get into shop drawings or any submittals, so we can see what is that, because I do think it was a good idea.
That's the double doors, right?
Right.
In case of fire.
Well, we likely, because of the security and the cost, we'd have one leaf that would just be a standard exit panic device only with no entry, and then the other one would be the entry door.
Okay.
So we would basically take some of the glazing out and add a glazed wood door.
Okay.
Right, thanks.
We looked at trying to issue that during the bidding, but we thought it would, contractors don't like a bunch of addenda rolling out because they're getting all their numbers lined up, and then we changed the game on them. So we decided just to address it later. And we feel like we have, with the cost of the frame, the glazing, the door, we're going to add some more hardware, but we're hoping that it won't be a big impact.
So what we have in front of us gives us what we need for next year's programs.
You'd grow the program from 2 spaces, one that's adequate in size, one that's not, to 3 spaces that are going to meet the needs of the staff and the program, and then additional support space, which you currently do not have.
So Steve, I just wanted to say thank you because of the many, many pages of documents that are potentially available to us. I was really satisfied with the level of information that you put in the recommendation letter, and I thought from a summary perspective, I was also really pleased that sort of what our original estimates were from the 2 different facilities. I thought that was very positive that was in there, because it gives us a very different frame of reference than if we, if we didn't have that or had to go search for it. So
Yeah, it was interesting to see, to go back especially to the 2011 estimate where that was, because that was very broad brush. What we're proposing is different than what we had in that estimate.
Right.
And then we were looking at, if the grant had come through, a more extensive renovation, which would have topped, been $2 to $3 million worth of work, because then we probably would have taken the corridor walls, all the lockers, and really changed it in wholesale. But this really improves the program, and we're looking at, we're repainting, new finishes. I'm sure we'll be using the lockers for storage.
And even though the fourth classroom isn't being used, then that whole gymnasium is gross motor space.
Correct.
So the whole facility is being used.
Absolutely.
Nothing's off limits, even though it hasn't been remodeled according to this particular.
And it has new flooring. You did an asbestos abatement project, 2004, so it has new flooring. So it's a nice space, and we even talked as a design team, as much as they love getting that fourth classroom, they really love the gym the way it is. So it was kind of, which do you want? Because it's a nice space. They have it set up where there's a large, gross motor space, and there's small breakout spaces. So right now, they're really using the entire gymnasium.
Great.
Well, thank you. So, where do we go from?
You would need to make a motion then.
Okay, so are there any other questions at this point? Okay. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the early childhood first start, sorry, back up. The chair will entertain a motion to award the general contractor bid for the early childhood center renovation to DeJames Builders Incorporated in the amount of $909,208 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please, Mrs. McMahon.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Mrs. Knappbush?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Can't wait to see it.
Well, it's going to be exciting to see.
Can't wait. Okay, then, Kim, what do you want to do now?
The abatement.
So now we will go back to number 1. So the review and award of asbestos abatement bid.
So I have a couple questions.
Okay.
The first one is, this one doesn't include what our original estimate was. So how do the bids compare to what we originally thought this was going to cost?
This actually is a little bit less than what the consultant thought. They thought it would be in the $60,000 to $65,000 range. So, and we did meet with Bay Remediation.
Yep.
And review their bid, make sure they were comfortable, because if you look at the range of bids, there's about a $30,000 to $35,000 difference between the next lowest bid. And we are comfortable with how they bid and how they price things out. They did not bid any time for weekend work, where if you read the documents, you might assume that the expectation was to have people on site over the weekend. So, but again, Mike and Mark Ravanisi from Integrity Environmental sat down with the contractor and the person who would be on staff running the program and went through all the requirements. We will have, after the award of the bid, have another meeting to go through all the expectations. And the abatement consultant also has someone that will be on staff during the entire project to manage it. So we do feel comfortable with the recommendation.
Okay. I mean, these numbers are all over the place. This one's
And
quite a bit
they're,
more
you
scary
know-
than the other one, I think, from just a,
Right.
I mean, the highest bid was $140,000
amazing.
more than the lowest bid. I mean, that,
And Shannon, sometimes what happens is, obviously, all the construction in schools, you only have a few months to get it done. So if some of those companies already had other abatement projects in the work, they might go, okay, well, hey, I'm going to throw a number out. If I get it, great. I make a ton of money because I'm going to have to pay people time and a half or double time to get the project done, but I don't really need the business. So we'll just kind of see what happens and how maybe pressing it is for a school district to have to go ahead with the project.
well, even
So-
as you mentioned, the difference between the two lowest bidders is pretty dramatic for the amount of the
Right.
contract. And you said no weekend work. I mean, and
Well,
you said that
obviously,
there's
if
the
they need-
consultant staff's a person. Is that
Yes.
is that part of this, or that's
No,
an
this is
additional?
in addition.
The staffed consultant person is an addition?
No, that's part of our
Okay.
cost with the consultant.
Okay.
So,
Okay, any other questions or comments? All right, then the chair will entertain a motion to award the asbestos abatement bid for the asbestos abatement work at South School to Bay Remediation LLC of Chicago, Illinois, in the amount of $55,000 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please, Mrs. McMahon.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Notbush?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
All right, the next item on the agenda is approval of early childhood program proposal.
Okay. So tonight, we have information for you on the different programs that we're looking at for the 2013 school year. And we'll start off first with the First Start programs and preschool tuition program. Currently, we have a morning and an afternoon First Start class, and that is for at-risk students that have, factors maybe like low income or some other needs. They might be ELL students, and so this year, last year we had just the one session. This year we added the second session, and we have two part-time teachers on staff and a full-time teacher assistant. And most of that program is funded by the Preschool for All grant. That's a competitive grant that the staff worked with me to write, and we were awarded that 2 years ago. And they're working on writing that again for this year. That program is funded. We currently receive just under $109,000 from the grant. And then this year, with the addition of the second class, the district has contributed about $45,000 to the program. So the total cost of the program is about $154,000 for this school year. Next year, we're proposing the same program. However, the composition of the class is going to be a little bit different. We'll still have those students that exhibit at-risk factors for low income, limited English proficiency, but there may be some students with IEPs in there. And then we're also looking at starting our tuition-based program. And so we're thinking that probably have 10 tuition-based students for a total enrollment of 40 for next year.
So this year's enrollment's 37, next year's enrollment is 40?
Right, but
I'm
it
losing-
varies from year to year what students are eligible for the program. And we didn't start the year out with the 37. That has grown throughout the year. Requirements of the grant, we need to have the students funded by the grant in place in October.
Okay.
And so we think that given the time frame that we'll have the slots to add tuition-based students to this program.
It just makes it look like we're only serving 3 more people next year than we are this year.
Yeah,
I
it's just
couldn't match that
a
up
little
with all the
bit different
words.
composition. And one of the things, obviously, the tuition-based program is what we want to do. So when we get the 4th program in place, that will grow so that we have that classroom filled in both the morning and afternoon. But since we're not renovating those spaces at this point in time, this will give us an opportunity to start building the program and getting word of mouth out there so that next year we hope to have a full classroom for that 4th classroom. So when we're looking at the estimates for next year, we're going to assume that we're going to be awarded the same amount of grant funds as we have this year, although that's anyone's guess.
Really? I mean, how safe is that assumption?
It could be less.
Okay.
But I don't know what it is. So, I mean, we're going to go with the assumption.
Has it been
that we'll
pretty
have the
consistent over the last
Pardon me?
couple of years? Has it been pretty consistent, the amount each year?
Well, no.
I don't recall.
Before we did the competitive grant, we only got about $54,000, and last year Rosemary was at about 118.
Yes, this
Okay.
year, it went down almost 15%.
Okay.
And what they're projecting, Ms. Christensen and I are working on the new grant. They're telling us to write it for the 109,000. But over the last few years, then typically they come back and say you need to cut.
Little less.
percent.
Okay.
It's not an all or nothing, right? It's like you can get,
Well, if you have, you can only apply for it if you've already been awarded it. So there's no new competition, and then, it depends on what other districts do. If some, there may be a district who's doing it and decides they don't want to continue the program, so there may be some additional funds that way. It just depends, it's a district-by-district decision, so.
And does the number of students we serve impact how much we can ask for?
When we wrote the original, we had to write the competitive grant 2 years ago, and it did at that point, plus everything that we put into the grant and how many at-risk students we were serving. And then we stretched the money this year. That was to cover 20 students, and we stretched it this year to cover, quite a few more.
Okay.
And,
But do they recognize that we're serving more students now, and can you ask for an addition, or you kind of capped it where you started?
Serving more, but I don't know. It did not. The e-grant that I got, which is a continuation of what we got, did not offer that option.
Okay.
Yeah.
Later on, if there's more money available.
Through some conversations with the state, I did find out that after they award, you can ask for more. I did. I know that now this year too, so I will ask sooner and see if we can get some more money. So, it's all the things you learn after you ask enough questions, so.
Ask the right question. You have to ask the right
the
question.
only reason I asked that is because when we tried for that big grant, it was like, you got
That was
all
the
of it,
construction.
or.
Right, that was
it wasn't like,
construction,
so
right.
that's why I wanted to ask that question, so, okay.
All right. So based on this, we're estimating, again, 10 full-time slots for, and then so at tuition. So 27.5 of revenue would come in from tuition, so the district would be contributing about 25,000. So again, I guess, worst case scenario, even if the grant funding went down, our district contribution would remain about the same for next year, and we're hoping that it's a little bit less that we have to contribute.
And if we have more demand than 10 full-time slots, how much can we handle?
That's all we
That's our
can
max?
handle.
And what if
Yes.
we don't have that, and we're not getting as much revenue, then that's just all money we have to.
Right. Right.
Can I ask a question? So, just so we understand, especially since we just talked about that. So we started out the school year with 20, and through the school year,
Right, we've added throughout
we've added
this-
17 more students.
We probably would have been able to add 20 plus,
Mhm.
but by the time we added to the school year, many families already had
Okay.
been accepted somewhere else.
Okay,
looked into
okay.
something somewhere else.
But
So we
that's,
had several that turned us down after their child.
Okay.
We preschool screen 4 times throughout the
Right,
year.
right.
So at each point, there are more children that we find become eligible for the program.
Okay.
but we are servicing more students here
Than we've ever done.
than we've ever done before. Okay, I just wanted to say that. That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
Okay. So, and then this, so then the tuition that we're proposing along with this program for a 2-day option is $200 a month or $1,800 a year. For the 3-day option, which would be Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, it's $250 a month or $2,250 for the year. And 5 days, $300 a month or $2,700 for the year. And then we'll be requiring a $50 non-refundable registration fee, but we will apply that to their May tuition. And in your information too, you have a brochure that the teachers in Linda worked up, and that will go out.
I love that brochure.
I do too.
Very nice.
I have to tell you, we are still working on the
It's very informative.
Mrs. Fowler suggested that we ask one of the high school students to draw us.
Very nice. Oh, good, great.
It's very nice. It is very nice. And it'll be interesting to see what comes of that.
Okay. And then does anybody have any questions on that program?
No.
Okay. And then on the early childhood program.
Good luck with your grants. We look forward to hearing from you.
The early childhood program will continue as it is, which is a half-day program for student with IEPs. And we currently serve 20 students in that program. That would be Doris's classroom as a point of reference. And those costs are in the current budget, so there's no change to that. But then for the new classroom that we're adding, this is the early childhood program, which is a self-contained class, and that would be comprised of students that with IEPs that would be more appropriately served in a full-day program. It's a new program being considered, and it's dependent upon the end-of-year progress reviews. But that program would be able to have a capacity of 8 students with 1 teacher and then 2 teacher assistants. And the cost associated with that, okay, I put in the cost for the teacher with salary and benefits. And again, that teacher position is a new position. The TA positions, I've put in the cost as an additional cost. However, based again on our staffing needs, we may be able to use current teaching assistants for that program. Again, that is all dependent upon end of the year reviews. Then we've got supplies and materials for that program. The transportation component, because it's special ed, we would incur that cost regardless of if the students go to an in-district program or are outplaced.
Wouldn't it be less if they're not traveling as far?
It depends because some of it's mileage based. It depends on where they're going. And it's difficult to, I don't have the quote for that, so we're just calling that cost neutral. That may actually be a savings to the district, but depending upon where that student's placed or whatever, you still have to have, a lot of times you still have to have the special ed transportation, and sometimes that's not necessarily based on mileage. It's just based on, here's the cost.
Doing it, just
right.
based on doing it.
Right. And then equipment and furniture are included in the construction costs for the renovation. And then we've got professional development of $500, a food service, again, that they'll participate in the school lunch program.
What does that mean? There's no cost to us for them to participate?
Well, we
in the
won't
school?
have anyone on site to, we won't have servers at our building. We'll satellite, and the teacher will facilitate, and the teacher's aide will facilitate serving those students lunch.
Okay.
And then summer curriculum, we're estimating about $500 for program development.
1,500?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
A long week. So anyway, total cost of about $141,000. Now, one of the things we're looking at, if we have a capacity, if we're serving 8 students, outplaced tuition would average $32,000 per student, so that cost would be $256,000. We do receive $3,500 per TA reimbursement, and we do receive $9,000 reimbursement for the teacher. So if that cost were, or that class were at capacity, we would actually see a net savings to the district of about $99,000.
So how many students do we currently outplace?
Linda?
District-wide or in terms of this program?
In terms of this program, how many?
We're actually looking at, what do I say this? We're looking at the current configuration of the classes in anticipation of the end of the year progress reviews, and where we would likely be moving children to SACID programs, we will not be able to offer an in-district program.
So I guess my question is just, would you anticipate that we would be outplacing 8 students next year if this program was not available?
My estimate would be that we would be looking at beginning the school year having outplaced at least 4 students.
Okay.
And then as we see the information that's coming to us through Child and Family Connections, as we anticipate students, and then also reviewing what the data that we have regarding the children that have come to us and the more significant needs that they're demonstrating. I would say that to get 8 children in that program at some point during our school year would not be unreasonable.
Okay, so your minimum is 4 and then up to 8.
And when you say minimum, we're thinking about starting the school year with at least 4 in that class. And then having that opportunity for other children to have an in-district placement as an option, as opposed to being someplace outside the neighborhood, outside the community.
So I guess another question for you, Linda, would be, how does the program that we're going to offer compare to what those students would potentially be receiving if they were outplaced? I mean, do we know what they're receiving outplaced? I think it's wonderful that we have a goal of serving the students within our district. I think that's hugely positive for the families in this community, particularly of those students, but just in general. But I'm just curious how aware, how much have you considered in the design of the program, because this is new to us, what are they currently receiving, and are we going to be, is it better than what they're currently receiving? Not just from an outplacement perspective, but from an actual what they receive from us. Are we going to be able to offer really more?
Well, we're waiting for and hopeful for the approval by the board, and then we can actually put some things into place. But our absolute goal and our commitment is that what we'd be offering is an increased opportunity over what they're getting as we're outplacing them. Just a minimal consideration is if our students our little ones are being outplaced right now, they are basically in a program that runs 4.5 days a week. We'd be offering 5 days a week. Our children have an option of, if we're outplacing again our little ones, we're looking at either having them placed in a multi-needs program, so they would be in a self-contained classroom with children with a variety of special education eligibilities, or in a classroom that would be specific to students with autism. And in order to place children in that classroom, as those programs are currently configured, they have to have a certain cognitive level. And so as we've talked, when you say, what if we could do this, what would it look like? And it's a very exciting conversation. We really think that our program would be a best practices program. I think that that's what we're planning to build. And Rosemary and Doris and Jill and other staff members, we've met and we've talked about, we would need this, we need this, we need to incorporate that. This is what speech services might look like. This is what the other related services could look like. So.
And do we have an opportunity to provide a smaller class size because we're bringing this in-house, or is this the typical class size regardless of outplacement or in-district service?
We typically would not see more than 10. So starting out, and I think that's good with the new program. If we're starting out with fewer children, we have an opportunity to really work through any challenges that we might face as the school year opens. But then I would anticipate we would be just moving ahead. We're just hopeful that the board will approve this, and then we can advertise, and then we can get our teachers set and our paraprofessionals set, and then we're ready to go.
Yeah, it seems the smaller class size would dramatically benefit a student with these types of needs, so that's positive.
If you're making a recommendation, working with parents and the school team, if you're making a recommendation that a student would benefit from a full-day program, you really are looking at more opportunities for more individual work. So whether you're working on some things that are specifically are techniques that are recommended for children with autism, or you're working with some techniques that are recommended for children that have what we used to term communication disorders, or those kinds of things. Certainly the smaller class size benefits, and we've had plenty of discussions about class size, so we know it. And I think it filters down to early childhood as well, probably more so.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking the questions.
I just noticed now, can I just ask can you come up to the mic? Just because we have some more questions and you're in the back and I'm not sure if other people can hear that. Maybe all three of you, fine, that's good, just because we want to make sure that everybody can hear your answers. Thank you.
I thought I was using my teacher voice, so I'm sorry.
You are, but
But the viewing public online can't hear your teacher voice. We hear it very clearly, thank you. Yes.
All right.
Okay, Joel, you have?
No, yeah, my question just really was, we have capacity to go up to 10 should the need be there. Okay. Would that require then an additional I mean, I know it's all based on the individual needs of the students and how that fits into the classroom structure, but would that then maybe require an additional teaching assistant or something like that?
Well, there are children that come to our programs, whether they're district programs or outplaced programs, that just by virtue of their unique needs, we assign one-to-one aides, and there's really no way to know that. So if a student qualified or was eligible for a one-to-one aide by virtue of his or her IEP, then I would expect that you would see that. I think that it's as likely that we might be looking at how we could reconfigure some of our service delivery in the area of speech and language. And we're actually hoping to work with, we've done some outreach with St. Xavier's, and we're hoping to develop a model where we've got more consistency in terms of speech interns, so that we have some additional folks coming to us that way, so that they're helping to support our students, and at the same time they're getting the support they need as they go on in their program. So we're looking at some innovative ways to provide some additional staffing for the program should we need it.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
So along the lines of, like what we talked about, we started the school year in the other program with students and then added. So start as you're thinking right now. So then you can add then to that program should the need arise. Am I correct?
Do you want to add?
I was just going to say, one of the things that's happened this year is we found that the flexibility between the classes has been very beneficial. We had children that were in a smaller class, in an early childhood class with a 10-to-1 ratio, that are going to kindergarten next year. So we were able to, as those children became more and more ready in their class, to give them the opportunity of joining with the First Start class, which is a class of 20 children, a more regular ed setting like what they're going to receive in kindergarten. So by adding this extra classroom and the 3 teachers working together, I think we're going to have more flexibility to meet the individual needs of the children, because we can sit down and talk about, this one still needs this classroom, but also needs the experience of visiting in another environment that is more like what they're going to see next year. So we found that to be really valuable this year. I worked in a multi-needs classroom as an aide before I started working for the district. And so, I saw a lot of one-on-one and the opportunity. Then when I first started teaching in the First Start program at South School, we had 2 multi-need classes in the building, and they were bringing their children down to join us, just for whatever was beneficial for that student. And I think we'll have a lot more of that flexibility when we have another class in there, even if the children will be maybe a slightly more needy. I think we'll be able to meet the needs better because of the way we can all work together.
I will say here that I also like, in addition to the fact that we are going to be able to, educate these children that need that I do particularly like that one of the values of the program is that the students will be able to be served in their home school district with their siblings. I would also have to think that, I don't know where these students go, but are they maybe in a vehicle for a long time, and maybe that would be reduced? And you're saying that their school week would be added, right? Because you're now talking 5 days as opposed to 4.5. I don't know. It just sounds to me like there's a lot of additional value to the program in terms of us being able to educate our students.
Some of our little ones might be traveling to Downers Grove, some are traveling to Villa Park. Okay. So depending on their situations. Because the programs that we're grateful that SASA offers to our students can be in any one of those 18 districts, obviously unless it's a high school district, but can be in any one of the districts that has an elementary program. So they could be traveling, and certainly, I think Shannon, you asked a question about do we know that what we're going to offer is better, and I would say, I in no way would like to suggest that any of the programming that our kids are currently receiving is not what we would call appropriate and really best practice, but when you have an opportunity to, have a really dynamic team, and I'm sorry Doris is not here to hear this as well, and that includes the paraprofessionals. When you have that opportunity and you've been in the field for a while and you bring that expertise, and then you have somebody new to the field who brings all that energy and passion, I would expect that we would put all that together and really have a program that the district would be very proud of. And I think it was Kevin that said, and Kevin, I'm probably not quoting you accurately, but the sense of it was, will we have a program that people want to visit? Will we have a best practice program? Will we have a program that people want to come out and say, this is what they're offering in 201? And that's absolutely our goal. We're not, we don't just want a program, we want a fabulous program for our kids.
So on the flip side of that, of the outplacement question, is do we have an opportunity, or would we anticipate other districts coming to us and saying, we'd like to outplace our student in your program because of what you're trying to build? I mean, obviously, it seems to me that would be desirable. Is there then, do we expect any opportunity or any request or any desire to have in-placement, kids from other districts or kids from other areas potentially?
A few years ago, that was actually a conversation where there were some of the adjacent districts that came together and said, how can we better serve our early childhood students, and could we, if you had a program, could we send students to your program? And depending on how the board feels about that, I think all those things are possible. There certainly are. I would certainly see in terms of the full-day program, because that is something that I don't see many districts offering as a district model. But we know in terms of our early childhood children, if we have early childhood children in an early childhood program coming in, they are children with an IEP. So we think of it early childhood, and those are children with IEPs, and then we think pre-K or First Start. Those are general education students. But as our students come to us with IEPs, we're mandated to provide those services. And so if you're out of space in a district, you've got to look someplace else. Right. So hopefully you have a good relationship with a neighboring district, and you can see if that's a possibility, or you're outplacing kids to private placements or to placements through the co-op.
Okay, just curious.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you all.
This whole program, I think, is like the core of serving our students, starting with our youngest students and giving them a fantastic kickstart.
Well, we really see it as the foundation, and we're really looking forward to doing so much in the program, just in terms of parent outreach and having people come in to see our classes, and continuing to collaborate with other districts that are doing some really fine things, and having just the benefit of sort of the collective wisdom around the table. I think we've got really a dynamic early childhood team, and that is a credit to all the folks on that team, and it's just really a pleasure to be associated with them. So
it's been reassuring to have parents coming into our preschool screening, and we ask them where their child is going to be in preschool, and we hope it's going to be here at Manning or at South, or and we've not been able to serve all those parents in the past. So it's
That's
nice
exciting.
to be able that we'll have that option for all of them at this point.
That's exciting.
And if things work out well and the board approves the tuition-based program, we've got a team that's ready to go out and market that, so that we can, we're hoping for 10. It would be wonderful if we had more, and that would be a great opportunity to have. So thank you for your consideration. Thanks for giving us a chance to talk with you.
I want to say thanks to you guys, because I know this seems as though it's been a really long time coming, but it seems that you guys did what you did at warp speed in putting all of this together. So I really appreciate it, and I'm really excited. We're at this point now, so thanks.
And we're really excited about the new facility, so thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I guess we start our small giant program with our small kids, right? Okay, any other questions then? The chair will entertain a motion to approve the early childhood First Start programs and preschool tuition for the 2013-2014 school year as presented.
So moved.
Second?
Roll call, please, Mrs. McMahon.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Knapbush?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda, approval of 2013 summer school programs.
And as explanation for the board, I think you recall the high school received an AP grant. And the The purpose of the grant is to increase opportunities for other students to take AP courses that traditionally don't take AP courses, and all the research shows that even if a student takes one AP course, the likelihood of them being successful at the college level increases dramatically. And so a lot of what we're proposing, and then the other thing is you have to spend that grant this summer. So a lot of what we're proposing is, geared towards that, and we're able to use that grant money to provide these programs. Again, for the K through 8, we'll do the virtual summer school similar to what we did last year. The junior high also asked for a transition program for 5th graders going into 6th grade, and so we'll be offering that this summer. And then also a transition program from 8th grade into 9th grade. And the high school did kind of a very abbreviated version last year, and so they're looking to expand that. In addition, credit recovery for those students who are struggling academically. One of the goals of the high school is 100% graduation rate. And in order to do that, you have to work with students to stay on top of their credits. The college readiness that gets towards, again, that AP preparation. And then the AP preview are for students who would be currently enrolled in AP classes. And those are sessions that would be offered throughout the summer for students who are starting to work on their AP reading and writing. And then the jump into math is for students who, algebra is critical for students to be successful at the high school level, and then also on the Prairie State Achievement Exam, even though that slowly is being phased out. And so this would be an opportunity to identify students who maybe need some additional assistance, additional work, primarily in the area of algebra, as they transition into the high school. Overall, because we're able to use that grant, financially, the impact to the district, I would say worst case scenario would be $5,000 because we can do so much with the grant. With obviously the best case scenario is zero impact to the district. But and then the nice thing about the AP grant is we were informed that it is a renewable grant, and similar to the early childhood, once you receive the grant, you have priority for receiving it again in the future. And so sustainability is a lot more promising, because if we follow all their rules this summer, then the likelihood that we'll receive the grant again for next summer is very high.
That's always nice.
Kevin, the program for the transition to 6th grade, I see the number of students is 30. Is that selected students that need help to the transition, or is that open to anybody, the first 30 students to sign up?
That will be open to any student, and we're being
that's just a conservative estimate.
right. If the response was great enough where we could add additional sections, we would.
Okay, so it's the same thing for the transition to 9th grade, and then the same thing for the jump into math. Okay.
Right.
One area of concern that I do have is I saw on the transportation, we're talking about putting 5th grade going into 6th grade students onto the same bus with 8th graders going into freshman year, and I definitely have a concern with that. Just gonna say that out loud. I'm not sure that's the best solution there, but I understand there's cost involved, and that's still up to the parents to make that decision. But
And Gary, that's something that we'll review as well. One of the questions, we'll start getting assuming the board approves this, we'll get information out to parents. One of the questions will be, would you be able to transport your own student, or would you need transportation provided? And then that's one of the things we'll have to look at is number of students and age of students to make that final determination if we'll be able to.
Well, I would make sure when you're asking the parents, I would let them know what, the plan is here, that the bus is going to be 6th and 9th grade students, and how we handle that. Okay.
They may figure out how to get them there.
Right.
They might, which is fine too. I just,
Right.
I'm just not, that stuff that to me is a concern. So.
Especially since you might have some students who maybe hadn't taken a bus before.
Right,
These
correct.
incoming
All
6th
types of things.
graders
Right.
who are on buses with older kids.
Right.
I concur with that.
Otherwise, I think everything looks great. I'm very happy with it.
I have to say, this is a good meeting, okay? When I really sat down and read this was so exciting to me, because we have an opportunity to take students and start them off on the right foot if we just look at the 2 transition programs. So I am glad that, maybe it could be, it's open to everybody. So those two things right away, just kind of getting those kids, you know, I mean, we're working right now again on the 5th grade picnic that happens every year, just to get the kids to kind of know each other and things like that, but to actually have them have a program. And I know other districts do that. So I'm thankful for that. And it's also good to see that there's like the virtual summer enrichment program. That's still offered for people who, you know, might want that. But I'm really excited about, you know, the credit recovery program and to reaching out to students who really need that help. This was a wonderful thing to read. And the fact that there may be minimal cost in dollars, we may make up for in academics.
Well, I'm very pleased to see summer school programming expanding. It's something that I thought was really a shame that was cut, because I think it's an opportunity to help students who are struggling and just kind of keep them in the school mindset over those summer months where they can lose some of their abilities. I'd like to see, I mean, and I'm thinking more along the lines of a parent here, what I have trouble or struggle with, and in context with some things we've talked about in the past, and that was this notion, well, first off, I think summer school is a great opportunity to try new things. And one of those things I know we've mentioned in the past is the notion of flipped instruction. And for me, as a parent with a student and math, I would really like to see something along those lines in the summer, if there's any kind of thought or possibility that from an educational standpoint that teachers would think that would be beneficial for our students, because having them come home and watch the virtual, some sort of virtual lecture and go to school, a summer school class, and then work through all those math problems that, you know, I can help them with the virtual and I can help them with that, but when it comes to doing all the math work, I think many times parents find themselves stuck. It's like they have to go back and relearn everything so that they can teach or assist in the teaching of their student at home when they struggle with math. And I think the notion of flipped instruction works much better from a parent perspective and gives the kids more of the hand-on expertise they might need in actually performing the computations and the math work, you know, in class with fellow students who are also learning it and with a teacher there to instruct. So it's just something that I was thinking of more than anything else, but it's just, I think would be beneficial for a lot of parents.
On behalf of parents everywhere, thank you for that, because I went through that this afternoon, you know. And our students tend to think we know it all, and we don't. And let's let the people who teach do that. But yeah, that's exciting.
Joel, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the term flipped instruction. Can you tell me in a nutshell what that is?
Yeah, so flipped instruction, in my understanding, is that the lecture kind of portion of the instruction can be done online. So a student their homework and assignment would be to watch the lecture or watch the demonstration or whatever the topic is. And then they would go to school and spend more time in school doing the hands-on work that they learned about or doing further enrichment on that subject matter.
Imagine homework with the teacher in the classroom and instruction with the parent in front of the computer.
Right.
Right? Yeah. And it's been utilized at high school level particularly. It's a very burgeoning, you know, idea, and there's been a tremendous amount of success, at least at that level, with student comprehension and ability and speed with which they move through content. And this wasn't originally one of my questions, but to add to that, I would say, personally, again, as a parent, I think flipped instruction is pretty phenomenal based on what I've read and what I've seen. I do think I would prefer to expand on Joel's comment from a board perspective and say, what ideas can we potentially be trying out during the summer school? I wouldn't want to limit it to flipped instruction, and I think our request needs to come from the whole board, not Joel as a parent. So to say, we happen to be aware of that particular phenomenon that's sort of taking hold at the high school level in various places, but I would definitely be interested in hearing if there are other opportunities for kind of like the thing in the junior high where we're going to try some of the bring your own device stuff, right? That's another one of those sort of burgeoning educational ideas. And I do think that summer school is a good place, potentially to have an opportunity on a smaller scale to try some of these ideas. And I would like to hear other, in addition to flipped instruction, what some of those might be. I do have a couple questions. I don't know if I interrupted anybody, but just real quick, I'm assuming 5th to 6th grade is held at the junior high and 8th to 9th is held at the high school. Didn't actually say that anywhere, so I just want to make sure my assumptions.
That's the intent would be to do that. The only, Kim and I were talking, as a matter of fact, this afternoon, we just need to sit down with Mike Melrose and the cleaning schedule of the building to just guarantee that can occur, but that's our goal, is to allow the 6th grade transition to happen at the junior high and the high school transition at high school.
I guess I would just submit to you that if it didn't happen that way, the pretty dramatic amount of the effectiveness of that might be lost. So, if we're going to do this, I think I would challenge you to do it right. And I think the right way is to have them in the new environment, because I think that's a big part of what's scary about going to the next, in those two particular transitions, is the intimidation factor of the physical space. So, the credit recovery, we certainly, when we have a student who is struggling, they're often struggling in more than one class. And I'm wondering what is the opportunity for a student who may need 2 classes of credit recovery, or, they may have more needs than what we've outlined here as sort of a single stream, and you can do one thing. And it seems to me when you look at students that do have needs, they do tend to have more than one need. So I'm just wondering, has that come up? Do we have an idea about how we would serve or, try to meet those?
Yeah, let me, honestly, let me ask Jack Baldwin, the high school principal, just to see if he's thought about those types of situations. My guess is he has.
Right. I mean, particularly with 12th grade students, obviously, where the amount of time we have available to try and play catch up there is really small. So, I mean, certainly in that case, even because I in the outline it says 12th grade credit recovery is during this session, and then 9th, 10th, and 11th. I mean, do we need to have 12th grade available for both times? Because
well, and quite honestly, this isn't the one thing I can share, because the one thing that Jack and I share as well is that your traditional summer school where, for 6 weeks or 4 weeks, whatever it is, for 4 to 5 hours, and to just repeat the same assignments, the same information with the same textbook, if the student wasn't successful the first go around, the odds of them being successful, very limited. So this is more, the high school has been focusing on formative assessment, and that allows them to identify those areas. And the other thing that can happen, and some of you may have experienced this, where, most of the material the student understood and was able to complete, and it was that one concept that tripped them up, and sometimes that can derail a student. And so the goal would be to focus on those particular areas that the student needs to focus on, and to meet those objectives and goals for that class in order to recover the credit. So, and I want to touch base with Jack, and I can let the board know this, but there may be that possibility where a student, hypothetically, they're at a 59% in one class, and so what they need to do to get that credit, they could do in a relatively short span of time, and so then focus on another area. So I believe that would be the intent, is that if a student is motivated, they could focus on more than one area during that time frame.
One more question about summer school. So one of the things that we discussed last year when the virtual program was going to be piloted was the notion of what else can we do in the summer. And I think that one of the things we discussed at that point is there are a handful of teachers, I know sort of particularly at the lower grades, I'm not as familiar with the upper grades, but that have a packet and say, well, you're coming into third grade next year, you're a second grader, here's like a summer packet. You know, it's just free study, time with your folks, whatever it is. I think that in addition to the virtual program, which, you know, some families won't take advantage of or aren't that interested in, that as we work on the new core curriculum and we work on all these ideas of what's needed to pass to the next grade level, well, what's needed to enter the next grade level, right? Not just pass out of second grade, but enter third grade. You know, what are things we might want kids to get a head start on? And I think that in the idea of offering as many summer opportunities as possible to keep kids engaged. So for example, if you have kids maybe who go with their families overseas for the summer because they have extended family that's in elsewhere, they're not going to do virtual summer school because they're in wherever for 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks, but they can take a packet with them and it can just be something that's part of their daily routine. There aren't very many teachers that do that, but I do think that we should continue to find, you know, as many ways to engage kids over the summer as possible. And, you know, there are a percentage of parents in the district that would say, yeah, great, let's have a packet, and every day for 10 minutes, you know, my kid can do their page. And
we used to do that more, I
Right.
must say. That seems to have fallen off, and it almost seems like a teacher by teacher thing.
And I think it is.
But
Well, one of the things that we're working on as a district, which I think aligns with your thinking, Shannon, this past spring, our teachers have been involved in looking at the Common Core standards and then developing exit outcomes based upon the Common Core standards. And so once we finish that process, then the next phase is, okay, with the exit outcome, you know where the student needs to be at the end of that grade level. Therefore, this is where they need to be at the beginning of the next grade level in order to be successful. So I think that then allows us to develop that summer program for those students who are not where they need to be at that end of the grade level. You know, these are some of the things that we can do as a district to get them ready for that next.
Well, kind of like the algebra idea, right? I mean, we've identified that algebra is a cornerstone of success in math in high school. You know, there are certainly other things as you go through the grade levels that meet that criteria of being cornerstones. And I would submit it's not just about students that are below, it's about every student just having a little bit of practice over the summer, regardless of where they fall on the success scale. It's about having content and material that's in front of them so they have, you know, write a paragraph one week and do a couple math problems another week. I mean, whatever it is, it just keeps it fresh. So I think we should really try to expand even more. I think the things we're doing this year are more than we did last year. I mean, they're wonderful offerings. You're just trying to figure out if there's a way to touch even more students in a way that isn't incredibly painful or costly. There may be teachers out there that already have a summer packet, and maybe, you know, we can, all of the classes at that grade level could benefit from that, and they just aren't currently, that kind of thing too.
can I ask something here? I think, you know, again, I'm so excited about all this. I would now like to say, I think the next step is so imperative that we get the full information to our families.
Right.
And going back to the wonderful flyer that we have here for this program, to have something like with a lot of details, especially like some of the questions we're coming up with. Because if I'm a typical 5th grade parent, let's say, and I see, or 8th grade, I'm like, really, my kid's gonna go to, but unless we talk about what those benefits are, what it might look like, for that, and especially because it's new. Because it's new, there'll be, this is just a summary for us, but it would really be good to see some of these questions talked about, and especially like something like Shannon said, we're holding it at the school, so that student would walk into that building feeling comfortable. So for those two things specifically, since it's brand new, and all these other things, and to really, really get that out, because I'm looking at here, and so what we're proposing is then you want the parents would submit the registration form by June 5th for those two brand new things. So again, everyone it's like middle of May, and everyone can barely see straight. So But the other thing here, if I go to this information for current Westmont High School students, there's something on here that says register by May 3rd. So is this something that they've already done?
The high school, and they knew it was pending
Yes,
board
okay,
approval. And I
okay.
told them they'd have
Okay.
to go back and tell people
Okay.
otherwise. But, right, they've been, for the credit recovery,
For the credit recovery?
because they
Okay.
want to see how many students are involved.
Okay, and I know that Jack has come to us and talked about
Right.
trying to do that, so it's not like, but I just really, I would like to see, more information go out than is necessary, because then we can really talk about the benefits of these programs, because I'm telling you right now, my kid's going. So it's in August 5th through August 15th, and it's Monday through Thursday, 8:30 to 11:30. That's not a great burden on a family, and it's right before school starts. I'm just excited about it, and I just want to make sure that we make sure that our community knows that it's a
Get the word
good
out there.
thing. So,
Very exciting.
anybody else? Okay. Thank you for this very much. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the CUSD 201 2013 summer school programs as presented.
So moved.
Second?
Roll call, please, Mrs. McMahon.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Notbush?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Okay, and adoption of student textbook.
This is a textbook for the high school forensic science class. They're expanding the class, and so as a result, Lori Erasmus, the teacher who, if you recall, did a board presentation, she went to the FBI and received some training that now she brings into the classroom. And so she's recommending a new textbook for the class for the 2013-2014 school year.
Anybody want
Just
to?
a quick question. I know that when we agreed to offer these additional courses, we had sort of a budget in place. Does this purchase fall inside of that, what we anticipated to be spending for curriculum, for course materials? We know? I mean, I remember we kind of talked about
Right,
what was the
right.
cost of adding new
I
programs.
believe it was.
Okay.
I believe it was, yes.
This program, I think, is so well-received and so popular that,
It is very popular.
yeah, I'd be in it if I was still in high school.
You want to read the book? Okay. Okay. Any other questions on it? Okay. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the adoption of the high school science textbook, Forensic Science for High School, as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please, Mrs. McMahon.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Notbush?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes. Superintendent's report?
Just a couple of quick items. One is just a reminder that our next joint committee meeting is May 23rd. And we're also, it should be 23rd. So, yeah, it's the
Okay.
23rd. It's the 23rd. And again, this is kind of the culminating meeting in which each of the subcommittees will be reporting out on their work for the year. We'll also, prior to the start of that, so at 6 o'clock, will be our parent meeting regarding professional learning communities. And that will be an opportunity for parents to find out if they want to find out just about their particular child's school, what occurred during the PLC time and some of the things that have been accomplished. They can do that, or they can find out from all the different buildings. And there's been some questions as to going forward, and the intent would be to move forward next year with PLC time in the similar fashion that we have this past year with Wednesdays throughout the school year. So, and again, that information will be shared on the 23rd as well. Oh, you know what? It is the 22nd.
No, the
I'm
21st.
getting-
The 21st.
It was
Here's the
originally on the
calendar.
21st.
It would be the 21st, but we had to move it to the 22nd for this one.
So we're doing it on a Wednesday.
Yeah,
Wednesday. We're doing it on a
22nd.
Wednesday.
Right, Wednesday the 22nd. And that's why when I saw that, all right, so it is the 22nd, yes.
I'm changing it in here right now.
All right.
Okay, and then, can we, again, like, because we've told our parents we would do a PLC update.
Right.
Can we add, normally there's an email that goes out to tell
Right.
people about,
We'll be doing not only email to committee members, but we'll do it to district-wide, so that
Yes,
all our
okay.
parents get that information. Because we like, for both meetings, we'd like to have a large turnout.
okay, so not May 21st.
Right. And the last thing I have is, and this was in your orange folder, but if you recall, we were piloting bring your own device at the high school level, start with a couple classrooms, and we're going to be expanding that in the high school. And then also at the junior high, we're going to be piloting with 8th grade with bring your own device. And so over the next several days, the parents will be contacted of current 7th graders so that that information can be shared with those parents, and we can receive feedback from those parents. And then if it goes well, then we would like to expand that at the junior high as well.
How do you determine if it's going well?
It's based upon a couple of criteria. One is teacher feedback and student feedback, but then also, if it is making the impact that we hope it will academically, and if we're not seeing an increase, I would say an increase of, misuse of technology.
I have a couple questions about misuse of technology. Is this a good time?
Sure.
Okay, so when I saw this come out about at the high school, I had, a couple of concerns, but I'm not sure. I never addressed them. So is an iPhone acceptable as technology that can be used at the high school?
Yes.
Okay, so how does that conflict with cell phone policy?
Well, that's one of the things that we're going to be addressing. We're going to be having a policy committee to take a look at that policy. And so definitely we'll have to do things to tweak our policy in order to allow some uses. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that the school can't discipline students for misuse of the technology, or that there are times when phone use will still not be allowed. And even when it's a classroom, and, for instance, when the high school was piloting in those couple of classrooms, there were times where students could not use their own personal technology. So if they had an iPhone, they could not use it. And so there are still, ways to hold students accountable for the use of that technology.
And then, how do we handle liability? So if a student brings an iPad to school and it breaks, or another student breaks it, is that our liability or is that the student's liability?
It's the student's liability. It's similar to, calculators. Students bring calculators, those types of things. Now, if it is truly another student that does something, we would handle that like we would any discipline situation. And, and if you recall, depending upon the situation, there are some times where we do have the student has to reimburse the district or another student for what's occurred.
Okay, and then children who don't own their own technology, how do we handle those children?
Nancy Pataglia is working on purchasing Chromebooks, which would be allowed for, students' use. And so we would allow students to borrow those. The one thing she's also looking at, and it depends on how well the bring your own device works at the junior high level. One possibility, and I know we don't like talking about fees, but possibly at the junior high level, having a technology fee over the 3 years of the junior high experience. So ultimately, at the end of that 8th grade year, the student owns,
All right, rent to own?
Right. So basically, the child is, the family's paying a technology fee, and that it provides them with the device, but then they own it at the end of the 3rd year.
All right, so then my last question is really, it has probably more to do with cheating, cyberbullying, pictures under the stall door. How do you avoid all of that with this technology in the school and always out and always visible? How do you get around that?
Well, I think, number one, that, even without having bring your own device, those things can occur. And again, it's making sure that students understand the appropriate use of the technology. And then when they don't, we deal with those situations and we make sure that we respond to them in a consistent fashion. I guess the analogy I would use is, currently we allow all of our employees to have internet access as part of their job responsibilities. Well, there can be times when somebody doesn't use it appropriately, and the response isn't to say that there's no internet use for that building or for the district, but rather we deal with that employee and in the way that is appropriate. And so I would say the same thing with our students. That we handle each situation on a case-by-case basis and deal with that situation. And it's not the technology that's at fault, but rather how the technology is abused.
Yeah, I guess my concern, it would be very easy to take a picture of a test and text it to all of your friends. So are the grades going up because you're using technology, or are the grades going up because everybody has a copy of the test?
And those are, some districts have treated it differently. Some will say that you have to check your technology at the door on the day of a test, or, it can't be visible anywhere. Just somewhat safeguard those practices.
So are we doing that?
That will be part of our
policy?
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
So a question about thinking about this is continuing to expand. Every year we have new grades of students moving in. And a lot of kids, regardless of economic circumstance, have some kind of handheld device. That just seems to be a priority for families across the economic spectrum. Are we going to have some kind of list or something that says, hey, if your kid's in, fourth grade or fifth grade or whatever grade, and you're considering now making a purchase, these are things that work well with, I think that we should consider doing that. That's because particularly families with more limited economic, means, they don't want to make a purchase, at the end of fifth grade and then realize by the end of seventh grade that really that wasn't the best choice, and considering these expanded programs, we really need this other thing. And we may have had enough tests at this point now that we can say, here are some things that we know, students like the iPhone, and oh, by the way, it's a great fit for the program. Or, even the ages of kids that I see, which are pretty young to have their own devices, there's every range from mid-sized tablets to standard tablets to all different types of phones. And that's just a limited number of kids that I see that are 10, say, for example. So I think that as families are considering those purchases, we should have some things out there that say these are a good fit.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay. You're done with that?
Yep.
Are there any public comments? Then the chair will entertain a motion to enter closed session for the purpose of discussing probable litigation and personnel issues.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please, Mrs. McMahon.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Knappbush?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton? Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Yes. And there is no vote after closed. So thank you all for being here.